The recent recapture or the return of regime and Russia to Daraa, specifically in Daraa al-Balad and few other cities in Daraa governorate, was essentially the end of post-2018 order. An order which was basically shaped after regime's return and recapture of rebel-held areas in Daraa and Quneitra back in 2018, with the substantial help of Russia, and to some extent the tacit agreement of Syria's southern neighbors. When we say regime return to this area, we essentially mean two things. One, the regime or its strategy was to dismantle and uproot the networks of resistance that remain in the area after 2018 and re-establish its authority in the localities where it did not have authority previously. It has to be noted that this was regime's strategy all along since 2018, because it was not that happy with the arrangement that happened back then. However, there were few regional developments that accelerated and helped the regime to impose its security order in Daraa, namely the Arab gas pipeline project, which intends to transport gas from Egypt to Lebanon via Jordan and Syria. In addition to that, Jordan's recently shifted policy towards Syria. In a sense, Jordan does not necessarily oppose regime's stronger security and military control on the south, on Daraa specifically, as long as it does not harm certain Jordanian interests and certain red lines that the kingdom has. And those are primarily a new refugee influx from South Syria into Jordan. And Jordan hopes that the return of the regime into the area brings a degree of stability which would prevent such an influx. The other two important points are basically that southern Syria does not turn into a launchpad for foreign militias or foreign powers, specifically Iran, to wage wars beyond Syria's border, especially with Israel, but also with Jordan, since Jordan also has a security concern. The third point relates to shadow economy, and in particular the smuggling of drugs into Jordan from South Syria or through Jordan into the lucrative Gulf markets. So in short, as long as these red lines of Jordan are respected, the changes in Daraa are not going to necessarily harm the Syrian-Jordanian relations. Since 2018, when the regime recaptured southern Syria and subsequently the border crossing between Syria and Jordan was opened, the kingdom was keen on reviving the economic relations on both sides, given the importance of Syria to Jordan. Nevertheless, these efforts bumped into at least two major obstacles. One was US administration's opposition to any sort of economic and political relations with Syria, and this was during the Trump administration. And second, Damascus was not necessarily enthusiastic about rebuilding economic ties with Jordan, as long as the political track was blocked. There was no political rapprochement between the two sides. So this changed very recently when, with the new US administration, which seems to be more understanding of Jordan's economic and political problems. King of Jordan, during his visit to President Biden, it seems he managed to explain that from Jordan's perspective, waiting and pressuring Syria economically and politically will not bring any benefits to Syria. And I think this was very clear from King's remarks. And it kind of explains the shift in Jordan's policy, namely that waiting for a political solution in Syria will not bring any good to Jordan, and engaging with Syria on important issues such as drug smuggling, security issues, presence of foreign militias would yield more results from Jordanian perspective. And we indeed see the changes or the implications of this policy change on the ground. For instance, just recently, the Syrian defense minister visited Amman to meet with his counterpart. Before that, there was an important meeting between the energy ministers of Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan to discuss the revival of the Arab gas pipeline, to name a few. Nevertheless, it should be noted that this does not mean political rapprochement from Jordan's end. Rather, it means closer economic ties with Syria and closer cooperation on military and security issues when it comes to the Syrian-Jordanian border.